Okay, so Aryaman, now quickly you describe your whole extended essay process.
So you want me to describe the process itself
No,
or the extended essay?
extended essay process.
Process.
Your
Okay.
journey, your journey.
So I guess the journey actually started in around Jan or Feb of 2020. And at the time, I was really unsure of what I wanted to do. So I wasn't, sure of whether I wanted to pursue something in organic chem or whether I wanted to do something, a little bit more in terms of traditional non-organic chemistry. And so I kind of experimented with different branches and different fields. And then I did some research into things like acetophenone, which is a precursor to many drugs. And then I also did research into the degradation of different nutrients. And I think all of that research kind of, I looked at a wide variety of topics and looked at all of them in depth and looked at different things that could be studied. And then later on, about March or Aprilish, I think we sort of settled on using the critical micelle concentration and using micelles as a larger topic. Um, and so that's when it kind of took off. And so I feel like a lot of the initial steps were just doing a lot of research, finding literature sources, literary sources, finding, finding out about what micelles are and how different, factors affect micelle, the critical micelle concentration. And I think until around September, I was mainly focused on figuring out what exactly I was doing, focusing my research, and coming up with kind of a preliminary draft of what my research would be about and what my aims and goals of the extended essay would be. And I think around end of September, beginning of October is when I actually started the experimentation process. So also because of the lockdown, because of the pandemic, I feel like I wasn't able to do a lot of primary research early on. And so I pushed this to a little bit later in the process. And I actually did my primary research in around October. And around then is when I collected all of my secondary data as well. So as a part of my research earlier, I had got secondary sources of data, and I kind of collected, a lot of stuff that I could or that could be used. But what I did after that was collecting primary data. Um, and then after the primary data was all collected, it was about mid-October. And then I actually started writing out my extended essay. And I, wrote the first draft, finished the first draft by around beginning of November, and then finished the final draft by mid-December.
Okay, so what was your biggest challenge and what is the most interesting part in your extended essay?
So I think the biggest challenge that I faced was actually like, getting data. So actually getting like sources of data and also like focusing on what exactly I wanted to do. So focusing my research question to a very small, subset of things that were possible. I had a very broad amount of stuff that I could do. So, I could look at many different types of surfactants and I could look at many different factors and many different ranges. But I feel like, especially like the pandemic gave me a focus into what I wanted to do, which was looking at the pH and temperature, because those are two factors that could easily be changed in a real world setting. And looking at ranges in which they are applicable, in a real life environment. And I feel like that really helped me get my bearings and focus my research question on something that was relevant and pertinent to the time. And I feel like the most interesting aspect of my extended essay, apart from like all of the applications, is I think something fairly technical. So I think most of the research that, or most of the sample extended essays and other, projects that I've done include collecting data and doing arithmetic or numerical processing of that data. But I feel like with my extended essay, I did something new, which was using graphs to process the data. So to find the CMC, I plotted the conductometry or the spectrophotometry readings against against different concentrations of the surfactant used. And then I used the graphs themselves and found the point of intersection of those graphs to give me the CMC value of the surfactant at those varying conditions of temperature and pH. And I felt like that, like the whole, just the idea of using graphs to process your data was very interesting. Instead of using graphs just to represent data, you can also use them to, process new types of data and get your final data from there.
Aryaman, if you look at your process, okay, whatever you've discussed and told us today, if you were to do the whole extended essay again, would you make any changes or would you still do it the same way like you've done it?
So I think the final outcome with the extended essay would be largely the same. But I feel like especially early on, I felt like my research was a little bit too broad and a little bit too unfocused. And at the time, I think I might have felt like, covering a very wide variety of topics is what's good and what's required. But I think I very quickly realized, especially with the help of my supervisors, that sometimes you need to, instead of focusing on too many things, you need to look at like the specifics, and focus your research to things that are relevant and things that are pertinent. And so I feel like I would have spent less time at, looking at different things and different aspects of the essay that weren't especially relevant. Like I think I did a lot of research into acetophenone, which was one of my other topics, which I felt like I could have stopped a lot earlier. Like I didn't need to continue doing so much research into a topic that I was probably not using. And also looking at just the topic that I was using, which is the critical micelle concentration of CMC. I think I tried to tackle too much. I tried using conductometric spectrophotometry and tensiometry as my primary methods. And I tried to do all of the research as primary research, which I felt like would have been too time consuming. And that's why I eventually had to narrow down my research. So if I realized that early on and didn't try to continue doing too much research, I would have probably been better off in the extended essay process.
Okay. Aryaman, so if you look at the whole process of extended essay and what your final RQ has come down to from the initial RQ that you started out with, what were the different skills that you used to focus down your RQ to what it is today? How
Um,
did you do that?
So I guess just to recap, I think my initial RQ was very broad and very general and wasn't specific to the point. So I think I used a lot of thinking skills and research skills to limit my RQ. So of course, I used a lot of critical thinking and analysis to look at the factors that were important and the factors and methods that weren't as important. And I used that to reduce and focus my RQ into something that was more concise. And then I also used a lot of research skills because these research skills are what allowed me to narrow down on my temperature ranges and pH ranges. And initially, I wasn't sure of what I would use, so I hadn't included it in the RQ. But my final RQ has my pH range and temperature range, and I feel like that was only possible due to my research skills. Furthermore, I think what really helped with narrowing down my topic was the interview with Dr. Naresh Ghatlia. And so I feel like I used my communication skills there to, learn exactly what I needed to learn and by asking the right questions and getting the right answers.
Okay.
What kind of advice would you like to give to your juniors, which you like, the kind of challenges or the biggest problems you come across in terms of your deadlines, in terms of your process? Okay. So everything, what are the suggestions or the advice you would like to give to your juniors?
So the first thing that I would tell them is to select your topic based on your interests and like your subject. Do something that you enjoy because the extended essay is something that you're going to have to stick to for the rest of the year. Um, and so some other advice that I would give students is to early on in your research try to find a topic within your subject that you are interested in, and try to focus your question early on, because I feel like what happened with me was I spent too much time trying to narrow down and focus my topic, and then I had a little bit less time to do my research, to do my primary research and write out the drafts. So if there were any advice, I would tell them to stick to well before the deadlines, and try to finish their work as soon as possible. and focus on, trying to get a focused research question very early on in the process. And I feel like this would be greatly helped if a student is interested in their topic. So if you're interested in your topic, you're automatically motivated to work more towards it. And so I feel like just being interested in your topic would greatly help with focusing a research question as well.
Okay. Ariman, through this extended essay process, what have you learned about yourself as a learner?
So something that I was very apprehensive about initially in the extended essay process was doing research, and I wasn't really sure how I would find so much data from so many different sources. But something that I've realized is that, if I put my mind to something, I can actually achieve it. And as long as I have the time and dedication, and I make the time and motivation, and like have the motivation to actually go ahead and achieve something, I feel like it's taught me that I can achieve so much. And I've also realized the importance of research to everyday life. Because throughout the extended essay process, something that I've realized is that future research builds on top of past research. And while I felt like that's something that people know, I don't think they realize the extent to which that occurs, and the fact that future research and building on scientific knowledge is very heavily determined on the pre-existing scientific knowledge, and you really need to have a strong foundation before you can move on to writing a research paper of your own.
Okay. Ariman, taking from your response, would these skills or would these learnings from the extended essay, because I know you are not taking chemistry in college, would it be useful for you in college that you have done this extended essay in chemistry? If yes, what are the skills that you think would be useful for you in the future?
So I think the biggest takeaway that I have from the chemistry extended essay is the research skills. So I feel like something that would really help me is, because I've written a research paper, which is the extended essay, and now I have the experience with writing a research paper. I feel like it would become a lot easier for me to, sort through different sources, find reliable sources, filter out the sources that might be unreliable or might have incorrect data. As well as I feel like it would help me to, in whatever subject I decide to do in the future, I feel like research would be a big part of it. And so just the ability to actually even just format and structure a research paper would greatly help me in the future.
Okay.
What are the other ATL skills do you think are strongly developed in you
Um,
during this process?
So I think the research skill, as I mentioned, is
Yeah.
like one of the biggest things that I feel like has been developed within me. I also feel like the thinking skills were very important because I had collected a lot of data, but actually sorting through this data, making the correct graphs and actually analyzing these graphs correctly, and looking at different types of trends. So of course I had linear trends, but I also had a few quadratic trends. And so just being able to think about all of these things really developed my thinking skills. Um, I think it also developed my self-management skills because just because of the scope of the extended essay, it's such a large paper. You have to be very organized with what you do, and you need to be able to manage many different aspects within very strict deadlines and time limits. And so I felt like this really developed my self-management skills, along with, of course, the fact that I have to reflect on my progress. So there were the three reflections that I have to do for my extended essay. I felt like it really helped me with my self-management skills and actually reflecting on what I did wrong, what I did right, and what I could improve on in the future.
Ariman, when you look at your extended essay today and you look back at the day when you decided to do chemistry extended essay, is there a level of contentment, satisfaction, maybe some disappointment? What do you feel when you look at the 2 days, today and that day?
So I mean, that day I was extremely nervous and I was like very uncertain about what I wanted to do. And at that time, I really wasn't sure about whether this was even the right choice that I was making, or whether I should do something else. But I think now I'm very certain that I made the right choice because I'm extremely happy with how my extended essay turned out. I don't think I could have ever imagined at the time that I would have a complete 4,000 word essay with, so much analysis and so much data. And I feel like I'm just extremely happy with the quality of the data collected and, the different kinds of graphs that are present in the extended essay. I didn't think that I would ever be able to do something. So I'm actually extremely happy with the end result.
So, Aryaman, what were your coping techniques when you had a setback, and what advice would you give your juniors? Because many a times, what happens during the extended essay process is that it is such a long process that in between, in the middle of the way, students lose focus, they just give up. Okay, so at that point of time, what would you advise both from the academic point of view and both from the stress management and self management point of view to your juniors? For you, what you did and what would you advise them?
So from the academic point of view, what I would say is, I mean, just not to worry about it, because eventually you will find a topic that interests you, and there is definitely something that you would be extremely interested in. And if you've selected that thing that you're interested in, then just doing more research, just think of it as fun and think about it as, something that you're not doing for work or for a deadline. Because what I've realized is that whenever I have to do something for a deadline, it tends to feel like a chore, and it tends to feel irritating. But if I think about it as something that I want to do for myself, it becomes a lot easier. And so that's something that really helped me get over a lot of my blocks. So in the middle, I remember I was really stuck because I just couldn't find secondary data that I needed for my extended essay. So what I realized was, if I stopped thinking about it as, a whole list of numbers and letters that I had to go through and find the right data, and more started to think about it as an exploration of what I was doing, I found it easier to manage with that. Along with that, what I would say is, don't be too stuck on one research question. So if you find that you have another research question that's either better or easier for you to find good data and make a quality extended essay on, I would say don't be too fixated on one research question. Allow yourself the flexibility to change your research question along the way and slightly tweak and modify it at any time along the process. And from the less academic and more personal side of things, I guess the advice I would give is to just take a break, stop for 2 minutes, and think about what exactly you're doing and why you're doing it. And I feel like that would motivate you to continue and move forward in the process. And the only thing that you shouldn't do when you're stuck is stay stuck. Like, anything is better than remaining stuck, because you'll always find something, or find something interesting, or find something new to discover. And so I feel like just following that philosophy would greatly help with the extended essay.